Rigby's Roads by Michael Charles Massenio. Chapter 1. Jack decides to end his life. July 2002. Jack put the car in park and saw the pages of his past flash before him. He had played on this dead-end road when he was a kid. He and his friends would ride their bikes here when it was only a path and goof around all day. This was where he had his first beer, his first cigarette, and where he experienced his first kiss. It was only fitting that he end his existence in the same place that gave him these pleasures of life. He was parked on the dead-end road that ran parallel but 30 feet below Aspen Lane. The close-knit jungle of aspen trees between the roads made it the perfect place to park and not be seen from the road above. It was called the dump road because of the scattered broken appliances and worn-out furniture that mysteriously found their way here to their final resting place. As the evening approached, Jack looked out the fogged-up windshield of his '94 Camry and saw the approaching thunderstorm was getting closer. He picked up his .38 Special and checked the bullets. There was only one, and now he was second-guessing himself. Suppose I shoot myself and I'm still alive? I need a second bullet to finish the job. I don't want to be found half dead. That would be terrible, he thought, without thinking that suicide itself was bad enough. He was seeking finality, not a second chance. With the car still idling, Jack could smell the fumes from the exhaust pipe. What a terrible way to die, inhaling those noxious odors. How could someone take such an unpleasant path to death? Death should be instant, without a slow bus ride down the path of regret. He finally turned the car off but left the radio on. Jack's whole life was centered around getting to the point, making a decision, and getting on with what's next. He was a freelance creative consultant who was sought out by think tanks and companies for his feedback. Once you started him on a problem that needed to be fixed, or a vague idea that was locked from becoming a reality, Jack would find a way to fix it or create a process to make it happen. Jack not only thought outside of the box, he thought outside of the room that the box was in. No problem was beyond his ability to solve creatively. Fresh out of college, he worked for NASA and was involved with the early moon landings. He was recruited by the CIA, but never made the cut. However, they noticed his ability for problem solving and creative thinking, and they sent him to Battelle, a government think tank where he became famous for his innovative ideas. But when his wife asked him to put up a shelf or hang a picture, he was totally helpless. His garage was filled with tools that he never used. He often defended his shortcomings in this area as, "My brain is overwhelmed with creativity, logic, and multifaceted algorithms, and the part of my brain that controls my ability to work with tools just doesn't exist." It was getting late, and the debate about going back home for another bullet now occupied his mind. It was an undisputed decision to blow his brains out. One shot to the temple, aiming straight to the center of the brain, will do the trick. Or will it? As he started to second-guess himself, he picked up the gun and placed it to his temple as if to rehearse. He hesitated, and then he put it back down again. He gave a big sigh, and then he raised the gun once more, placed it against the side of his head, and this time he pulled the trigger. He forgot to reset the chamber when he opened the gun to count the bullets. "You idiot," he chided himself. And this made him think about his friends. He was not thinking about his friends in the thinking world, as he often put it. They were his colleagues. His thoughts were on his neighbor, Henry Neeson, who lived behind him. Reckless and a little bit crazy, but the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. One time he was at a Broncos game at Mile High Stadium, and he and Henry both spotted each other through their binoculars from opposite end zones. So Henry, being the nice guy that he was, bought a beer for Jack, but he bought it right where he was, and he walked it all the way around to the opposite side of the stadium. By the time Henry finished his journey to find him, the beer was warm and half empty from spilling it. Why didn't he walk around to find Jack and then buy the beer? Well, that was Henry. Henry was a klutz of giant proportions, but he was never afraid to try anything, regardless of how many times it brought him to the hospital. When Henry was installing his new washer-dryer combo in the closet, he knocked a hole in the wall for the vent. Then his parakeet, Pete, flew into the hole and decided to go spelunking in the walls between the rooms. With his kids crying and his wife shaking her head with, "Here we go again," Henry picked up a hammer and proceeded to bang on the walls in an effort to chase the bird back to the opening. Tap, 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 ear to the wall, flutter, flutter. After 2 hours of knocking on walls that left a path of random dents and a smashed thumb from a misguided tap, Henry decided to give up. As he was surveying the destruction in the hall and about to turn off the light for the night, Pete flew out of the hole back into his cage. Henry was truly one of a kind. Jack smiled briefly at his reflections of Henry, then got back to his dreadful assignment. Jack reset the bullet in the chamber to be next in line, then stopped to admire the intricate work on the gun's handle and focused on the complex steps needed to create that process. It was the first time in decades that he had held it. It was his dad's gun that he inherited when Dad had died of cancer some 25 years earlier. Jack noticed that time itself seemed to be moving slowly as it was starting to rain. He rubbed his hand against the fogged-up window and wished he could wipe away his problems just as easily. He no longer had the mental energy to create a plan to put his life back in order. Emily, his wife of 30 years, had died 4 years ago, and that's when he stopped having an interest in life. Emily's death put him in a spiraling funk from which he could never escape. Jack's personal existence no longer had any meaning, and life's normal challenges became another pin to deflate his will to live. Jack's problems were varied. Lou Paxton, the IRS agent who forcefully audited his taxes 3 years in a row, had it out for him for no apparent reason and made his life unbearable. Another problem was that he had recently taken a job with an old friend as an excuse so he could get out of the house and back into a normal routine. But his immediate boss was a self-serving, idea-stealing cretin who robbed him of his creative thinking and stole his ideas. Jack's newspaper was stolen from his front lawn a few times a week. The kid next door used his fence for karate practice, and every dog within 2 miles came to shit on his front yard. Like the road he was on now, the other roads in his life had all become dead ends, and he had had enough. These problems in his life had drained his spirit and his will to live. Jack raised the gun to his head, but this time he was interrupted by the music. He could never shoot himself with "I'm Walking on Sunshine" blaring from the car radio. He changed the radio station carefully, grading each choice, and he caught himself laughing at trying to find the perfect music to accompany his suicide. He turned the radio off, but the momentary silence was interrupted with the sound of men arguing. He opened his fogged window to get a clearer view and looked up the hill to the main road. Through the trees and rain, he could barely make out a cop yelling at the driver of a car. He quickly reacted and put his gun down on the seat to try and hide it, like it made a big difference at this point. He could shoot himself now, and at least the cop would call it right in, but if he waited, he might be parked there unfound for days. The thought of becoming a meal for bugs or animals didn't appeal to him. The cop was yelling loudly, but Jack could only make out a few words because of the rain and the rustling of the leaves on the trees. "My deal. Bigger cut. Too late." The muted conversation was interrupted by a loud bang. It sounded like a gun. Jack was startled and could see the cop moving fast around the back of the car. 2 more shots rang out. Another man jumped out of the passenger side of the car and ran, carrying a stuffed gym bag. The cop shot the escaping man from behind, and the bullet knocked him down as he fell through the trees and rolled downhill to an unconscious stop right next to Jack's car. The cop approached the edge of the upper road and pushed away the lower branches of the trees, trying to find the man he shot from behind. Instead, he zoomed in on Jack's face, staring back at him from below. Jack froze and saw the malicious expression on the cop's face as their eyes met. He was now in fear of his life, which was ironic, but he didn't evaluate the irony of the situation. It was all happening too fast. The cop stood on the upper ridge and aimed his gun at Jack, 30 feet below. Jack stiffened and waited for death. His mind raced to newspaper headlines. Cop shoots man in self-defense. Then he realized his hand was still grasping the gun next to him on the seat. Those headlines would be worse than killing myself. He didn't want to go out wrongly labeled as a cop killer, but he had little choice as his miserable life was about to be snuffed out. He closed his eyes and waited. Jack winced, his body jerked with each shot, but he felt no pain. He opened his eyes to see the cop fall down, and he spotted someone's head barely sticking up above the road's ridge, who collapsed with his last breath of life. It was a shootout between the cop and someone else from the car. Jack was still alive, yet scared like never before. His mind raced. Now what? What should I do? He looked at the gun still in his hand, and his first intention was to throw it out the window. But wait, no, they could trace it to me somehow. Or could they? He laid the gun down on the seat and started to panic. He moved his shaking hands to the steering wheel and held on tightly, trying to focus. But his mental reasoning was scattered and irrational. It was these uncontrollable thoughts that scared him more than anything else. And now this added a new problem that superseded all others. He struggled for a path of possible alternatives. He was in shock. One thing he was certain of was that this was a bad cop who was involved in some kind of illegal activity. His concentration was suddenly interrupted when he felt the cold steel of a gun forcefully jammed into the side of his head from outside the car window. He moved his eyes slowly to see the fallen man was on his knees, covered in mud, with blood running down his face. "Get me out of here," he demanded, and then he collapsed. That was enough for Jack, as it was definitely time for him to make a move. He started the car, and the radio was playing. Jack turned the radio off. Jack looked out the window and realized the guy's legs were under the car, and he would have to run over him to get out of there. He couldn't do that, and if he did, it might leave some kind of tracks or clues to follow. The rain was falling harder, and the thunder was getting louder. Jack opened his car door, and it hit the guy in the head with a nauseating thud. The guy didn't move or react. "Oh shit, I think he's dead." As he leaned down to grab the guy's arms, he noticed the heavy boots, tattoos, and the black leather jacket. This guy is a motorcycle gang member. Jack struggled to drag him out from beneath the car. He had to weigh 270 pounds, maybe more. His weathered face and big white mustache made him appear to be in his 50s, but his full head of black hair gave him more of a younger look. Then Jack noticed he was still alive, still breathing, and there was blood running down his leg. The raindrops dripped down Jack's face as he surveyed the area. He looked up at the cop sprawled out on the embankment above him. He glanced up the road ahead where it ended at the no dumping sign that was shot full of holes. He turned in the other direction and saw the access road to personal freedom. His only choice. Or was it? He had another choice, and it became clearer as he glanced at the biker below him. And then something happened. There was a sudden flash in Jack's mind. Something clicked, as if a remote control was pointed at him and caused him to change channels. It was a moment that was so profound that he took special notice of it. He wanted this new challenge, and he proceeded full speed ahead down this unexpected new road. He opened the back door of his car and grabbed the biker's arms, trying to stuff him into the opening. He was struggling to complete the task. He went to the other side of the car and finished pulling his new problem into the back seat, inches at a time. He added the biker's gun and gym bag to the floor of the car. He carefully wrapped a rag around the guy's leg to prevent the blood from dripping on his seat. He also started to remember the CSI shows where the crime scene investigators insist there is always a clue left behind. Jack looked down at the rocky dirt road. There were no footprints or tire prints visible because of the rocks and rain, but there were drips of blood on the ground from the guy's leg. He picked up another rag from the floor of his car and considered wiping the blood from the ground, but that would smear the blood drips and it would make a bigger mess. He reached under the seat and grabbed an old plastic for sale sign and used it to scoop up the bloody ground. He walked the remaining evidence to the fast-running creek a few feet away and poured the contents in to be washed downstream. As he returned to the car, he noticed the rain was starting to form puddles on the ground, hiding any clues that may have been left. He turned and examined the area carefully. It looked okay to him. He returned to the front seat of the car, stared off in the distance and shook his head. Then he turned to the back seat and said to the unconscious biker, "What the hell am I getting into?" Jack turned the car around and he proceeded to drive home down this new, unexpected road in his life. End chapter 1.